Sometimes nature can be confusing.
For instance, in the title of today's video, I refer to this species of bird as the American starling.
In truth, I did so because I wanted to make it clear that I'm specifically referring to the population of starlings that, like me, reside in the United States. The problem is, in America, these birds, for reasons that will soon become clear, are known as European starlings.
No, I said starlings.
Having migrated here from Europe, I was confused further still, because back in my homeland of Britain, they're known simply as starlings.
Ornithologists might even know them as common starlings.
Either way, they're all the same bird.
So to sum up, today we're talking about the common European starling of the United States of North America, or just starlings.
And America has millions of them. Now, if you're wondering who the 1 millionth person will be to subscribe to my channel and you haven't yet done that yourself, do that now! In the meantime, let's talk about a bird that the Quincy Gazette calls a major league arsehole.
The Quincy Gazette.
It's a fictional newspaper that I invented for the purposes of exposition.
Led with this headline because they knew it would be relatable to their readership and, in turn, my subscribers.
You see, Americans that know their birds know that starlings are completely and utterly a little bit not good. As in, they're highly invasive.
To that end, they outcompete various North American birds, such as the chickadee or bluebird, for nesting cavities.
And did I mention starlings are complete psychopaths?
This is because they are known to attack and kill other birds by stabbing the shit out of them with their beaks. They're kind of like the mafia, but without the family drama.
And starlings have also caused widespread aggravation for humans.
Known for their love of fruits and grains, starlings in the US cause roughly $800 million worth of agricultural damage each year.
Often, this is done in partnership with other head birds like grackles. And 64 years ago, they even caused a human tragedy.
1 hour before sunset on October 4th, 1960. Eastern Airlines Flight 375 took off from Boston's Logan Airport en route to Atlanta, Georgia. Just seconds after takeoff, the plane encountered a murmuration of starlings, some of which were sucked into the plane's engines. Despite the flight crew's best efforts to stabilize the Lockheed airliner, it came down in Boston Harbor, killing 62 of the 72 people on board. Well over half a century later, it remains the deadliest bird strike in the global history of aviation.
So it's fair to say that the common European starling of the United States of North America is indeed an arsehole. And in the past year, I've been known to use similar language about data brokers.
Data brokers are those entities that sell your personal data, be it your address or your phone number, to people's search sites.
Thankfully for me, this is no longer a problem because for the last 2 months, I've been using Incogni.
Incogni is a personal data removal tool that contacts those data brokers on your behalf and requests that they take down your data.
And for a YouTube sensation like me, this has been most helpful, not least because I wouldn't have had time to do it by myself. And that's because there are literally hundreds of these people's search sites and I was showing up on all of them. So far, Incogni has removed me from 136 sites, amounting to over 100 hours of time saved for me personally. And it's not just content creators that are susceptible to the whims of data brokers.
If your personal details are showing up on people's search websites, Incogni will help you remove them. In fact, they're giving my subscribers 60% off their annual plan. Head to incogni.com/lostinthepond to get your discount and to thereafter protect your data. The link is in my description below.
Starlings, unlike data brokers, do have 1 or 2 redeeming qualities. Jarringly, one of those is the very thing that brought down Flight 375, murmurations.
Murmurations are when a flock of starlings, often numbering in the thousands, dance in unison like they're in the Cirque du Soleil.
It's a dazzling phenomenon that typically occurs at sunset between October and March. Question is, why do they do this, especially when they're not getting paid? Well, believe it or not, they're not doing it to impress humans.
You see, murmurations are effective at warding off predators like hawks or falcons, the theory being that there's safety in numbers.
The word comes from the murmur created by the flap of their wings and their in-flight calls.
From personal experience, I can tell you there are few greater sights than a murmuration against the backdrop of a Midwestern sunset.
That's why I was surprised to discover that Americans of centuries past never got to experience it. Here's why. Remember a few minutes ago when I said this? Having migrated here from Europe. Well, with those words, I might well have been describing starlings themselves.
You see, the name European starling comes from the fact that, like me, starlings migrated to the US from Europe.
Sadly, I now have the unenviable task of correcting myself in public. They didn't just migrate, they were brought here by humans.
One human in particular, actually. A man known as Eugene Shefflin.
While some of you might be thinking, who the heck is that? Others will say, I feel like that name came up in the 8th grade.
Either way, Shefflin was a 19th century pharmacist living in New York City. He was also the chairman of the American Acclimatization Society, the purpose of which was to facilitate the introduction of foreign species into the United States. In the spring of 1890, Shefflin released 100 imported starlings into Central Park.
In doing so, he had taken into account the starlings' considerable potential for beautifying the landscape of the country. Less considered, perhaps, was the degree to which they would populate.
In the 134 years since, starlings have multiplied significantly, to the point where they are now among the country's most abundant birds. In fact, the most recent estimate puts the number as high as 150 million in North America.
And as is becoming a trend on this channel, the bird inhabits 49 of the 50 states, with Hawaii the only exception.
And this is all despite the fact that in recent decades their numbers, both in Europe and North America, have been in decline.
Now at this point you're probably thinking one of two things. Number one, I've just learned that almost half of American history took place without starlings. Or number two, I do remember this from 8th grade and Lawrence is about to tell us that it's all Shakespeare's fault. While I do like to cite Shakespeare for the reason that it makes me sound smart, his role in all of this deserves the level of scrutiny we afford his plays.
First of all, by 1890, Shakespeare had been dead for 274 years, which some would argue points to his innocence.
Second of all, not everything you learned in 8th grade was true.
The basic, often repeated part of the story is that Shefflin was on a crazed mission to introduce to North America all of the birds referenced in the Bard's plays. Indeed, this would include starlings which are mentioned in King Henry IV, Part 1. Nay, I'll have a starling shall be taught to speak nothing but Mortimer, and give it to him to keep his anger still in motion. I've no idea what that voice was.
The problem with this part of the narrative is that it's not backed up by any evidence. No sources from the time indicate in any way that Shefflin was inspired by Shakespeare.
And that dubious connection wouldn't show up in print until 1948, when American naturalist Edwin Whatiel stated without evidence,
"Their coming was the result of one man's fancy. His curious hobby was the introduction into America of all of the birds mentioned in Will.I.Am Shakespeare."
Thereafter, it was repeated ad nauseum until everybody, including the Smithsonian, believed the myth without question.
Even if it were true, he obviously didn't do a very good job. I mean, what happened to the other 63 species?
Shakespeare or not, one thing is known for sure. Shefflin did indeed release those starlings into Central Park, and in doing so opened up a whole can of worms, much to the delight of early birds.
Now, before Suburban Sue starts bashing Shefflin on social media again, let's actually take a moment to appreciate some of the starling's more impressive qualities.
Firstly, they are a magnificent looking bird. This is helped by an iridescent vibrancy and a unique array of white dots, which calls to mind snow or bad dandruff.
And secondly, that's about it. Everything I read about them makes raccoons look like Bluey. If I've learned anything from this video, it's that Shakespeare can be attached to literally anything and people will believe it. A bit like the time he crashed my 18th birthday. But I've also learned that starlings are a lot like attractive people in mugshots. They're quite nice to look at, but shoplifting is still shoplifting. Last month, I talked about North American raccoons, who helped America gain retribution for starlings by wreaking havoc on Central Europe. You can watch that video next. Until the next time, goodbye.